All right, let's do this. Today, we're diving headfirst into the world of UFOs and all the government secrecy that seems to go with it.
A classic.
You know it. You sent in so much material on this, including that really interesting podcast script, Aliens and UFO Disclosure, What Governments Are Hiding.
Yeah.
It lays out a pretty wild theory, about governments covering up evidence of alien life. I gotta say, it's pretty captivating stuff.
It really grabs you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And, it's easy to get lost in the sci-fi aspect of it all, but there are some actual facts and reports, official ones, that we can actually look into.
Exactly, and that's why I'm excited about this deep dive. We're going beyond just speculation today. We're going to dig into the evidence, look at what people are saying, and see if we can make sense of it all.
Let's get to it.
So, how about we start by setting the scene a little? The term UFO became a thing in the 1950s, but your podcast script makes it pretty clear that people have been seeing weird things in the sky for centuries. Like, way back in 1561, there was that celestial battle over Nuremberg.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds pretty crazy.
Sounds like they've been noticing strange things up there for a long, long time.
Which brings us to Roswell, of course. 1947.
Big one.
For a lot of people, this is where the whole UFO thing really took off. The story, as I'm sure you know, is that this flying disc crashed in the New Mexico desert.
Right.
But the military quickly changed their story, said it was just a weather balloon. I don't know about you, but a weather balloon.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's the explanation that everyone loves to question, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Over the years, people have been really skeptical about it. There are researchers who say that whatever they found at Roswell didn't look anything like a weather balloon. And there are those inconsistencies in the official reports, of course.
Always inconsistencies.
And then you have people claiming to be witnesses who say they saw weird metal stuff and even non-human bodies.
So Roswell might be more than just a simple case of mistaken identity.
You could say that.
Do you buy into the whole cover-up idea?
It's hard to say for sure, but Roswell definitely raises a ton of questions. I mean, why call it a flying disc in the first place if you're just going to backtrack and say it was a weather balloon?
Makes you think.
Definitely feeds the suspicion that something bigger was going on.
Okay, so let's jump ahead a few decades. It's 2020. And the Pentagon drops these 3 videos.
Oh, yeah.
These videos show Navy pilots encountering objects that basically seem to break the laws of physics. You included them in your sources, by the way. The FLIR video, the gimbal video, and the Go Fast video. I gotta admit, watching them is pretty mind-blowing. These things are zipping around, making crazy maneuvers, going at unbelievable speeds, and you can't see any engines or anything.
Definitely wild stuff.
What's your take on these videos?
They're definitely compelling.
Yeah.
And I think their release was a huge deal in the whole UFO scene. It was the Department of Defense officially saying, hey, we've got things in our airspace and we don't know what they are. They didn't come right out and say aliens, but they admitted they were stumped.
Right, but the fact that they couldn't figure it out is pretty significant, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's not like these videos were just random flukes either. They were part of a bigger picture, a whole pattern of things they couldn't explain. And they were actually investigating it through this program called ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Now, this ATIP program is where things start to get really interesting. What's the deal with that?
Okay, so ATIP was this super secret Pentagon program. Ran from 2007 to 2012. And their whole job was to look into UFOs.
Really?
Yeah. And they got their funding because former Senator Harry Reid pushed for it. He was convinced that these unexplained things in the sky could be a national security threat.
So even the government was taking the possibility of UFOs seriously.
Oh, yeah. And here's the thing. It wasn't just about spotting potential threats. Luis Elizondo, the guy who ran the program, has said that they were also looking into the tech. Trying to figure out if they could learn anything from these objects, maybe even get a technological edge.
So we've got the Pentagon releasing videos of things they can't explain. We've got a secret government program dedicated to studying UFOs. It's definitely starting to feel like there's more to this than just people seeing things or misidentifying weather balloons.
Right.
But is this just an American thing? Are other countries seeing these weird things too?
Oh, this is definitely not just happening in the U.S. In fact, the global side of this is one of the most interesting parts of the whole thing. You included stuff about other countries like France and the UK, and they've got their own UFO programs.
Really?
They've been collecting data and looking into sightings for decades, and a lot of times they're working together on it.
So it's a worldwide mystery then. Governments all over the place are watching these things and trying to figure out what they are.
Exactly. And there's this one case from Chile, really interesting. Back in 2014, they released this 10-minute video taken from a Navy helicopter. It shows this strange thing. They described it as flat and elongated. It was moving all over the place, not like anything you'd expect, and even seemed to be letting out some kind of cloud. The Chilean government straight up said they didn't know what it was.
Wow.
And that video's in your sources, by the way.
Okay, so we've got these weird objects, nobody can explain them, and governments all over are stumped. And then there are the whistleblowers.
Right.
The people who say they know what's really going on.
The whistleblowers, they really add a whole other level to this UFO thing. They usually claim to have been involved in some top secret government program or to have seen stuff that makes you think there's a big cover-up of, alien activity.
Okay, let's get into some of these whistleblower accounts. You included information about Bob Lazar. He's a pretty well-known figure in the UFO world. He says he worked at this place called S4, a secret facility near Area 51, where he was reverse engineering alien spacecraft. What do you think about Lazar's story?
Bob Lazar's story, yeah, it's definitely one of the most famous and most debated in all of UFO lore. He claims that these spacecraft ran on something called Element 115, which, if you're not a periodic table enthusiast, is a super heavy synthetic element that you don't find naturally on Earth. People have picked apart Lazar's story, and there's no solid proof to back it up. But it's definitely caught people's imaginations for years, and it still does.
It's interesting that he mentions Element 115 because scientists have actually been trying to create that stuff in labs. It kind of makes his story a little more believable, even if there's no evidence that he actually worked on alien spacecraft.
That's true. Element 115 was just a theory when Lazar first talked about it, but now scientists have actually made it. It does make you think. And Lazar's not alone. There's Paul Hellyer, the former Canadian Minister of Defense. He's been pretty vocal about UFOs, saying they're real, governments are hiding the truth, and that there are multiple alien species visiting Earth.
Those are some bold claims, especially coming from someone who is that high up in government.
It definitely adds to the mystery. Here you have a big-time government official saying the things that UFO enthusiasts have been saying for years, that we're not alone, and that governments are keeping it a secret.
So we've got Lazar talking about Element 115 and alien spaceships, and we've got Hellyer saying governments are covering up alien visits. Are there any other whistleblowers who really stand out?
Well, you sent in some information about Luis Elizondo, the guy who headed ATIP, the Pentagon's UFO program we talked about.
Yeah.
His claims are particularly interesting because he's not just some random person on the internet. He had top-level security clearance and was directly involved in investigating these things.
Right, and what is Elizondo saying?
He's said over and over again that the government has proof of technology that goes against everything we understand about physics. He suggested that this tech points to some kind of intelligence that isn't human, meaning some of these UFOs could be extraterrestrial. And his claims seem to match up with what we see in those Pentagon videos, things moving in ways we can't explain.
So even though they're often controversial, the whistleblower accounts add another layer to this whole thing. They suggest that maybe there's more to the UFO phenomenon than just misidentified objects or natural events. But let's take a step back and look at the science here. Is there any scientific reason to think that these things could be extraterrestrial?
That's the big question, isn't it? Is there any scientific evidence for alien visits? One thing to think about is just how huge the universe is. Our galaxy alone has billions of stars, and scientists believe there are trillions of galaxies out there.
So you're saying that with that many stars and galaxies, it's statistically likely that there's other life out there somewhere?
Exactly. The idea that we're the only intelligent life in this whole massive cosmic expanse seems pretty unlikely. And if there is other intelligent life out there, isn't it possible that some of them have figured out interstellar travel?
It's a pretty logical thought. What about that equation I've heard of, the one that tries to estimate how many alien civilizations there are? The Drake equation, right? You even included a scientific paper about it in your sources.
Yeah, the Drake equation. It's basically a formula that tries to guesstimate the number of alien civilizations in our galaxy that we could actually communicate with. It looks at stuff like the rate at which stars are forming, how many stars have planets, how many planets could support life, things like that. It's more of a thought experiment than a precise calculation, but it highlights the factors that make extraterrestrial life possible.
Okay, so we've got the huge size of the universe, the Drake equation, and the fact that we've discovered thousands of exoplanets, and some of those are in the habitable zone, meaning they could support life. It sounds like the scientific evidence, while not conclusive, doesn't rule out the possibility of aliens, or even alien visits. Is there anything more specific, anything that might point to alien tech?
Well, there's Oumuamua. The first interstellar object that we know of to enter our solar system. You specifically asked us to look into it for this deep dive. We discovered it back in 2017, and it had this really weird shape. And its path was odd, too. It was long and thin like a cigar, and it tumbled as it moved, which isn't normal for asteroids or comets. And its path didn't quite follow what you'd expect based on gravity alone.
So what are the explanations for why Oumuamua acted so strangely?
Most scientists think it's a natural object, maybe a piece of a planet or a comet that got flung out of its own solar system. But some scientists, including Avi Loeb from Harvard, think it could have been an alien probe. They point to its weird shape, the tumbling, and how it didn't move just based on gravity as possible evidence that it's artificial.
An alien probe. That's a big claim. How has the scientific community reacted to Loeb's theory?
There's been a lot of pushback, with many scientists saying there's no need to bring aliens into it to explain Oumuamua. They say that its weirdness can be explained naturally, but Loeb and the people who agree with him say that the alien probe idea is a real scientific possibility, and we need to look into it more.
Okay, so we've got the Pentagon videos, the whistleblowers, the vastness of space, and Oumuamua. Seems like there's a lot of circumstantial evidence suggesting aliens might have visited us. What's happening now? Is there a movement for governments to be more transparent about all of this?
There definitely is. People are more interested in UFOs than ever, and there's growing pressure on governments to tell us what they know. And this push for transparency has actually led to some action.
Such as?
In 2023, the U.S. Congress held public hearings about UFOs, and those hearings caused quite a stir. People like David Grush, a former intelligence officer, testified and made some pretty shocking claims. You included a news article about these hearings in your sources.
What did Grush say?
He said that the government has been secretly collecting crashed UFOs for decades, and that they even have biological remains that aren't human. He basically said there's this huge ongoing cover-up to hide the truth about aliens.
Wow, that's a huge claim. Did the government confirm or deny what Grush said?
They haven't officially said anything, one way or the other. They're still being very secretive about what they know. But Grush's testimony, along with all the reports of things in the sky that can't be explained, has definitely made the whole debate about UFOs and government transparency a lot more intense.
So it feels like we're at a turning point in all this. We have more evidence than ever before, from videos released by the government to accounts from whistleblowers to scientific studies of things like Oumuamua. But the big question is still there. Will we ever know the whole truth? Will governments finally reveal what they know about UFOs and the possibility of alien life?
It's the question everyone wants answered, right? Will we finally get a straight answer, or are we just going to keep guessing and wondering?
It's a question that has fascinated people forever. Are we alone out there? And if not, have we already had visitors?
It's a question that gets to the heart of, our place in the universe. It makes us rethink what we know about science, technology, even our own history.
And you, the listener, are clearly really interested in this question. You sent us so many sources, everything from old accounts of weird things in the sky to scientific papers about whether life could exist on other planets. It's obvious that you've been thinking about this a lot.
What makes this topic so fascinating is that it goes beyond just science fiction and speculation. We're talking about actual events, official reports, and people who saw things with their own eyes. And those people are often pretty credible.
That's right. And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We're not just messing around with theories here. We're looking at evidence, trying to figure out what these claims really mean, and trying to solve a mystery that has been around for decades.
And one of the big things we've learned from all the stuff you sent us is that this is happening all over the world. It's not just in one country or one area. We've got reports of strange things in the sky from everywhere.
And these reports are coming from all sorts of people. Military pilots, people who just happen to see something, scientists, even government officials.
Exactly. And that's why it's hard to just brush it off as a bunch of hoaxes or people seeing things that aren't there.
Yeah.
This is a pattern that's been seen and documented by people from all walks of life, all over the globe.
So where do we go from here? What's the next step in trying to find some answers?
Well, I think it's super important to keep pushing governments to be more open about what they know. People feel like they have a right to know what governments know about UFOs and the possibility of aliens, and that feeling's getting stronger.
You sent us some information about this new project, the Galileo Project. Can you tell us more about that?
The Galileo Project, yeah. It was started by Avi Loeb, the Harvard astronomer we talked about, the one who thought Oumuamua might have been an alien probe. They're using the scientific method and data to try and find proof of extraterrestrial technology. They're looking for actual objects, not just stories. They're using telescopes, cameras, all sorts of instruments to scan the sky and look for anything that might be artificial, not natural.
So they're taking a very organized scientific approach to all this.
That's the idea. We need to go beyond just guessing and speculating and start finding some solid proof.
It's an exciting time to be into this topic. We have more information than ever, and there's a growing movement to take UFOs seriously.
And as we keep digging into this mystery, it's important to remember that what we find could change everything. If we find real proof of alien life, it would completely change how we understand our place in the universe.
It would challenge all our ideas about science, technology, and even our own history. We'd have to rethink everything we thought we knew about the cosmos and where we fit in.
It would be a total paradigm shift.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
It would change how humanity sees itself in relation to the universe.
And even though we might not have all the answers right now, just searching for them is valuable. It shows our curiosity, our need to explore what we don't know, and our willingness to question what we think is true.
It reminds us that there's so much out there that we still don't understand, so much to discover.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of UFOs and government secrecy, we want you, the listener, to keep asking questions, keep searching, and keep an open mind.
The truth might be out there, just waiting for us to find it.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll finally have the answers we've been looking for. But until then, the mystery of UFOs and the possibility of alien life will keep our imaginations going and make us want to look beyond what we know and embrace the amazing things we haven't discovered yet.
There you go.
And there you have it. Thanks for listening.